Hey folks, so there are three assignments that we are going to be doing over and over again in this class. For every single unit, I want to remind you that there is no huge research paper component in this class. And that is because I don't think that you learn how to apply critical theory to primary texts unless you're able to make mistakes and sort of be like, does that sort of make sense? I think all of us sort of freak out a bit when we have huge, long assignments. And so we never get that practice, that low stakes practice that we need to like zero in on a particular example and be like, here's how this particular example helps me understand this, right? So all of these assignments that I'm about to introduce to you are really about helping you deeply engage with the text in a low stakes way, okay? So this video is going to introduce those three assignments, okay? You're going to get more detail when you read the assignments yourself. This is just a brief walkthrough, all right? So there are three in order. The first one that you always do are hot takes. The second you're always going to do is cachet. And those kind of are recursive things. And then the last thing you do at the end of every unit is a flash post. So those are the three. So here we go. What's a hot take? It's a form assignment. So as we're listening to a podcast, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to, this mostly happens in class, these hot takes forms, but let's say that we're listening to episode 1 together in class. The hot takes form is just really your sort of, I would say sort of knee-jerk impression of the whatever it is that we are listening to, right? So you might use the channel to like emphasize a bit of dialogue that you're like, huh, that's interesting. Or maybe like someone says something really hilarious. Or maybe you just want to clarify like, hey, what just happened here? Like, oh my God, this is creepy, right? So the idea is that when I assign a hot takes forum, or for you to participate in it, it will be in the schedule and say, hey, we're listening to this episode. I want you to respond in the hot takes forum. You only have to respond when you're listening to a podcast in class. You only have to make one post to the hot takes forum, per time that I assign it. But most people are probably going to want to like continue to like engage in the hot takes forum like as like an ongoing conversation, because you're basically going to be spending the entire class period listening to an episode, and it's kind of nice to just have a whole channel where you're like listening to the exact same thing at the exact same time, right? To just have a conversation about it. It's a neat experience, right? So that is the hot takes forum. I do want you to post to the hot takes forum once and then also reply to 2 of your peers' posts. So again, most of you are going to be probably posting a lot and responding to each other a lot because it's kind of a neat exercise, right? So there's that. So the next thing that we are going to talk about are the cachet form things. So I have this whole adorable description of how you're going to be like space crows, and it's super cute. I was potentially delirious when I described this, but I do think it is a good analogy for what I'm trying to get you to do. So I want you to think about this as what cachet assignment prompts. Again, these are things that are always going to be just for homework. It's still while you're listening to the podcast. So like these always, the cachet assignments always happen when we're like in the midst of something, right? So there's that. So it might be like, hey, like we're listening to episodes 2 and 3 for homework, and I also want you to contribute to the cache. So this is what it is. All right, so I want you to find basically artifacts that are related to the podcast we're listening to. So that could be like maybe there's someone on Tumblr or Reddit or they're on Fandom Wiki who have posted a theory about like what's going to happen in the in the podcast we're listening to. Try to mark it if it's a spoiler, right? So just sort of keep that in mind. Or maybe you found like some really cool artwork, post it. That is totally relevant, if there's a social media post from maybe a showrunner or the producer or an actor, that's cool to share too. Like maybe there's someone who's sort of talking about their work on the podcast, or maybe they related to that, maybe there's something that the podcast itself references. So for instance, in the one that we're reading first, there is this particular forest that gets mentioned that is in Japan. That's like a suicide forest, which is kind of sad, and it is a real place. And maybe you want to find out some more information about that, right? And share that with your peers. There are going to be some references to those types of things. So if you want to share those, or maybe they may reference like a pop cultural moment or a political moment, like a historical moment, share those things, right? Because that deepens our engagement. Any of those, or there's an interesting review to the pod, or maybe there's like a song that keeps on playing on loop on the episode, share that as well, okay? So any of those things are relevant to contribute to the cache. And so just remember that you only have to contribute like one thing to the cache each time that I assign a cache post, okay? And you'll see those throughout. But you're just going to basically link to the thing, and don't just like dump it in there. Like explain why it's relevant and why you think it's interesting. Be like, hey, this is the thing that I'm sharing, and this is why I think it's kind of neat, right? That's it. And then you're going to respond to 2 of your peers' posts. And generally, I have you sort of post to the cache for homework, and then usually the next time that we meet, you like spend the beginning of class like reading and responding to your peers' cache posts. So that's it. You know, it's kind of neat. Yeah. So there's that. And I do actually, for all of these assignments, like I have the dates like that you're going to have, you know, cache posts due, or you have hot takes posts due, that kind of thing. So here is the last assignment. Okay. So hot takes and cache posts are kind of casual, right? Hot takes are just to help you get at that gut level response to things. And then the cache posts are to help you like to deeply engage with it. The flash posts are more like, I want you to think about these as if you've ever read flash fiction or flash nonfiction, that's kind of what I'm riffing off here when I'm talking about flash analyses. So the idea is that the only writing assignment that you have in this class is to write like a 2 to 3 paragraph long academic analysis of a snapshot, like a moment in the podcast that we're looking at, okay? So and I actually do give you like multiple examples of that. So let's just say, for instance, that you have finished Left Right Game and there's something really funky and interesting that's happening with time. And one of the pieces that we read for this was about crypt time, right? And how crypt time is like different, right? And maybe you want to be like, hey, remember this very specific moment in the pod where this happens, right? And, you know, the character is sort of having this flashback, and we realize, I don't want to give you spoilers. So the whole point is you could potentially write about crypt time, right? As maybe a way to think about that sort of feedback loop experience. Or maybe there are things in the podcast that you want to talk about in relation to psychoanalysis and trauma and this idea of hauntology, right? Any of those things. But the idea is to like, your canvas has to be small. So it would be like a snippet of dialogue or this very specific scene, and you're doing a deep dive. And the reason why that's really important is because academic analyses actually require a very deep and specific engagement with like moments in the text. So you're like homing in on your close reading skills, but you're also pulling in academic articles to like build your analysis, right? And you're not going to be using huge direct quotes from the piece, but you are going to obviously use in-text citations when you are citing that academic article, right? So if you need to get some refresher course on how to do in-text citation, I can certainly help you do that. You can use either APA or MLA as long as it's correct and as long as it's consistent. But the idea here is to just get excited about one thing and be like, hey, I see how this article connects with this, right? And then just talk about that. And so this just sort of gives you ideas of how to do that, all right? And I just give you multiple examples. You could be like zeroing in on a particular scene, a repeated image, or maybe a repeated theme that keeps on coming up in a podcast, or an interesting characterization of a particular person. So for instance, we have a piece that we're engaging with like later on in the semester that is talking about, well, it's called Desperado, and there's some really interesting stuff in there where there are characters who have like relationships with like old gods, and there are several characters who are inhabited by spirits that are not the same gender that they have. So there's like a goddess who is inhabiting the spirit or the body of a cisgender male, right? Or those types of things. There's also, I don't want to spoil, but there's some really interesting like gender things that kind of relate to like a decolonial experience, right, as well. And so that could be something that you might want to talk about, right? So, and again, applying the article to a particular scene in some kind of way, or a characterization or a piece of dialogue, right? So, and then I talked to you obviously about like the points possible and what the rules are for the assignment, you know, to get those full points, and then the dates that the different ones are due. Okay, so now you have gotten my spiel of these 3 different assignments, but the key thing that I want you to sort of keep in mind is that, you know, the cash posts and the hot takes posts are pretty casual, right? So today in class, we're listening to the first episode of Has Anyone Listened to the Left Hand, Right Hand Game? And then I want you to contribute to the hot takes post. And I always link to the hot takes post when I want you to do that. And then I want you to listen to episodes 2 and 3, right, for homework, and then contribute, 2, 3, and 4, and then contribute to the cash form, right? And then I link to where I want you to do that. So it's really, really straightforward. And the same thing happens when we get to the very end of this unit, and I want you to contribute to write something like the flash post. I always link to the things. You don't have to search around for anything. So it's really straightforward. And I think that this is going to be an enjoyable way to like have conversations about not only what we're listening to, but about applying the theories that we're reading to whatever it is that we're listening to. So I really hope this is an enjoyable experience, because I really want you to understand that it's cool to like get excited about something and see connections that you didn't see before, because that's like the whole point of this, right? All right, so now you know what the major assignments are in the class.